Entity structuring can be confusing, and oftentimes most people end up setting up their entities in a way that doesn't actually align with their business goals or needs. So today we're bringing in Jonathan Feniak, founder of LLCattorney.com, who goes into great detail on all of the different entity structures from LLCs to S Corps to corporations, all the way to trusts, and everything you need to know about these things based on how you are setting up your business or your investments, and how you can avoid a lot of the mistakes that many people make when selecting these entities. So he talks about all of the ins and outs of each one, which ones are overkill, which ones you should stay away from, and ultimately how you can pick the one that best suits what your goals are. Some of the best states that he loves to set these entities up in, and many of the wins and losses he's seen people experience by doing the things that you should or shouldn't do when it comes to entity structuring. So if you're somebody that is looking to minimize your taxes, protect your assets, and really find the best structure and setup to achieve the goals that you want as you build wealth in your business and your investments, and you're going to get some great value from today's episode. Let's go ahead and dive in with Jonathan Feniak. Welcome into the show, Jonathan Feniak.
Yo, thank you. I really appreciate being here. I'm super excited. I mean, you got some diversity in the people who are listening here, business owners and real estate. Great ways to build wealth, as we all know. Working for somebody else, you may do okay, but you're never going to get sort of that real wealth and be that millionaire, whether millionaire next door or millionaire on a private jet. The only way to get there is, I think, through the owning businesses and real estate. So super excited to be here with you.
Yeah, well, before we dive into talking a little bit more about what you specialize in and, the vehicles and how those are structured to, obviously we're all interested in building wealth. A lot of the structures, protect the wealth, as well as, mitigate how much of that gets, diluted out by the government. We'll talk a little bit more about entities and LLCs and the different structuring and vehicles and just strategies that I know you specialize in. But take us back to the beginning, brother, and your journey of, what got you on your own entrepreneurial path.
Yeah. So graduated college, undergraduate degree in English from Rutgers University in New Jersey. And I had worked at UPS at night loading trucks. I just read that's being replaced by robots now, so that job doesn't exist anymore. Did that, got out of college, went to work at Transportation Logistics in Manhattan, ran operations there, grew in that role. Was actually there on 9/11, and so had luckily didn't lose employees, but I was managing the downtown Manhattan operations at the time, and so that was a true test of my management ability. Stay cool under pressure. Very tough job. The hours were terrible. You got packages and things, planes coming in at 4 a.m. and planes going out at 2 a.m. And it was just very challenging. So I started going to college, got an MBA while I was still working, had kids while I was still working, family members passing away, sort of life goes on, but graduated the MBA, went into finance, worked for a hedge fund. We were investing in small private and public companies, doing really funky structures. Started my own hedge fund with some partners, was doing asset-based lending against things like furs and cheese and customer lists. And then the financial crisis, you may have heard of it, 2008, I'm not sure how old you are, but that hit. Threw life into a bit of a tailspin, moved to Colorado, became a financial advisor for high net worth individuals, 7 and 6 securities license, insurance license, annuities, whole life policies, and all those sorts of things with Wells Fargo advisors. And then, give me about a decade in a career, and I'm like, it's time to move on. So in 2017, went to law school, graduated law school 2019. 2.5 years early, University of Denver. And I had been managing trusts, managing businesses, started businesses, finance businesses, all of those things. And, graduating, wanted to focus on that path. Joined up with a father and son team out of Wyoming, had a company called Wyoming LLC Attorney. And at that point in time, they were trying to grow this thing. And I came on and we've been growing it. And, man, 3,000% growth since then. I should say since then. And we acquired the LLCattorney.com website. That's our premier website now. We still have Wyoming LLC Attorney, a bunch of other brands. And really the goal has been, we're not a law firm. The goal of this company has been to democratize legal services when it comes to business entities, because there's so much out there. Like, people think they've got a choice. I got to go with a lawyer, spend way too much, not necessary for the majority of real estate investors, sort of startup business owners, or you've got, sort of the other providers out there, without mentioning their names, the other entity formation businesses out there don't focus on what's really important from a legal perspective. And so we have tried to build everything inside of our, products and services. Embedded in it is what an attorney thinks is right. Not a law firm, but guided by attorneys. And that's something different. It's not a bunch of Silicon Valley, guys just trying to milk everything they can out of their customers. We really want you to be compliant. We want you to get the limited liability protection that you signed up for. And it's been going fabulously well. As I said before the camera came on, we actually refounded, moved the company to Puerto Rico in 2022. And so I grew up in New Jersey, lived in Colorado. Now I'm a bona fide Puerto Rico resident. Great tax advantages and incentives here, but great people and workforce. And it's really allowed us to grow and allow me to come on shows like yours.
Right? That's awesome. Well, let's kind of, talk a little bit first, maybe on the foundational level of like why entity structuring matters, for someone that's either new to real estate investing or they're starting a business. Why is entity structuring such a critical piece of the puzzle, and making sure that you get it right at the beginning to build properly going forward?
Yeah, so it avoiding something ruinous, right? Bad things happen. I'm no fun at parties. I'm a Debbie Downer, because it's always someone's dying, someone's getting maimed, someone's getting sued, someone's getting hurt, busload of widows and orphans, or, whatever. I mean, terrible things are happening. And so what I want people to understand is that your business may fail, right? You may have problems. You may get sued. Is it going to be ruinous? Is it going to take out everything that happened before that, the wealth you've built? Are you going effectively chips all in on every hand? That's not, maybe when you don't have a lot, that's okay. But as you're growing, you need to make sure that you can go on to fight another day. Don't have anything ruinous happening. That happens when there was a financial advisor. Don't be too concentrated in any one asset class, or in, you got everything in this single hedge fund or private. No, don't do that. Diversification, right? And so we want that diversification in your investments. We want diversification in your business entities. And we can create that great diversification when we've got your personal life, personal wealth, and business wealth. And the business wealth, the states allow us to do it. They allow us to limit our liability. They create limited liability companies and corporations and other entity types you can form at the state level. And you say, I am only willing to risk what I've put into this business. What this business owns is at risk. Everything else I have is not at risk. Okay. So if I start up a company and I put $100,000 into it, that $100,000 is at risk. But if something happens, the company's sued for $1 million, they can't get my $1 million home or my other real estate or other things that I own. So it's a trade-off. And what the state says is, that's fine. You can do that. You need to follow some rules. You got to be compliant. You need to respect the business entity. You need to make sure that it has its own bank account, that you follow whatever the laws are, Limited Liability Company Act or Corporations Act, that you follow those things. And if you do, you've got a really good shot, assuming you're not engaging in fraud, there isn't malfeasance, those sorts of things, then you will limit your risk to that business entity. If that business entity fails, which, you look at the number, 75% of businesses fail, look, that's okay, right? You will fail. Hopefully you don't, but it's okay if you do, as long as you've limited your liability to what's in that business entity. So that's the whole idea of this, asset protection, is that we're going to limit what you have up for grabs if something goes wrong.
So what are the common mistakes that you see new business owners, new real estate investors, when they're setting up their entity, or maybe they're not setting one up at all, what are some of those common mistakes that you often see that, hey, let's get these out of the way right now. You should be avoiding these right out of the gate.
The two things are going to be underestimating the risks. And as I said, I'm a Debbie Downer. Underestimate the risk. What could go wrong? Whether it's, wage and hour claims, or, that big customer you got that you're very happy with, but they've got all the lawyers in the world to be able to sue you, or the real estate where you did the work yourself. And so there's opportunity for fire or something else, right? So you underestimate the risk. That's on one side. The other side, and I speak to a lot of people like this, is they make it so complicated that they can't actually fulfill the compliance requirements, or the administrative burden is so great that they fail immediately. If you set up an entity and you say, we're going to meet every week and we're going to call the quorum and we're going to do this and that, and then you don't do it, well, the court will look at that and say, well, wait a minute, you follow some of the rules, but not all of the rules. Like what is this even a real company, or is it just your alter ego? You're trying to shield yourself in some way, in a fraudulent way, from liability. So you got to right size the structure with what your risks really are. Analogy is, I like telling stories, but let's imagine that I install home security systems, and you say, I want the maximum home security for my home. I'm like, all right, great. What we're going to do is we're going to build a 50-foot wall. We're going to have a moat with alligators. We're going to have guard dogs that will rip your throat out, and it's going to be great. It's the best in protection, but it's going to be hard to get your Amazon packages. Your kids won't get to school on time, and you're probably going to get sued because one of those dogs will go just crazy, right? And so they say, okay, I get it. How about new locks on the doors, a Ring camera, and we do an assessment, like, where is the risk of your property? And that's what really people need to think about is, what do they have at risk? And then what is the probability that something bad will happen? Insurance, huge believer in insurance, because that will cover you for the overwhelming majority of risks you're going to face. Whether you're a landlord, make sure you've got the right landlord policy in place, right? You got umbrella insurance. A lot of people don't know about it. Great way to get additional protection. And you got to be honest with your insurance provider. What is it you're actually doing? People, well, I get a lower rate if I don't tell them I'm doing short-term rentals. Well, if you get sued and it's a short-term rental, you're not covered, dude. Like, that's, you got to be, realize where the risks are, but don't overestimate or underestimate the risks. Right size the structure for what it is they actually face.
What are the most common kind of entity structures and setups that you would say are, kind of your favorite or most common to recommend? And how do you assess, what the right structure and setup is?
Yeah, there's, people think that they need a corporation. I want a corporation. I want that ink at the end of it.
Hmm.
I have to say, almost nobody needs a corporation, right? Almost nobody needs it. You need a corporation. Corporations have shareholders. They've got a board of directors. They've got officers. Corporate statutes impose a lot of different responsibilities. Meetings that you have to have at the, to elect the shareholders need to meet, elect the board members. Board members need to authorize the activities of the officers. The officers, if they go outside of those authorized activities, then they're potentially on the hook personally. People, for some reason, they want that. I want that corporation. Almost no one needs it. Who needs a corporation? People who need corporations are those who are raising outside capital. Right? You're going to be bringing in investors, private equity, venture capital, seed founders, all those things. That's great. They'll be the shareholders. They'll want seats on the board, but then they'll leave it to the officers to run the thing. You need those three levels. The overwhelming majority of people, it's two guys, right? A couple of sisters, a father and son, or two buddies forming a business entity, and they're going to do something. We're not sure how it's going to work, or if it's even going to work out. LLC, super flexible, easy to manage. The statutes are written in such a way that very low administrative burden, and you can form the LLC as a member managed LLC. I prefer manager managed LLCs for a variety of reasons, but getting the entity type right, unless you are, and it's really a negative. If you come to me telling me you need a corporation, I say, are you raising capital within the foreseeable future? Well, maybe if we, hit these milestones. All right, form an LLC. And then what people don't understand is, well, I want the tax benefits of a C Corp. Great. they're actually separate and distinct. And I say, like you used to go to a Chinese restaurant when I was a kid, and they pick one item from column A and one item from column B. A is LLC or corporation at the state level. Column B is tax classification. Single member LLC, it's going to be a disregarded entity by default. Multi-member LLC is a partnership by default. But then I can choose S Corp or C Corp tax election, right? And I can choose without changing my entity type. And a lot of people, their accountant will say, you need an S Corp. So they go and they form a corporation and then make an S Corp tax election. Instead, they should have formed the LLC and made the S Corp tax election. So understanding I'm going to say this right here, almost no one needs a corporation. Get the LLC. And if you want the benefits of a C Corp or S Corp, then make that tax classification election for your business entity.
Yeah, and what you alluded to a little bit earlier when I was early on in my, my real estate investing journey, and, you go to one or two seminars and you hear some person get up on stage and talk about their overly complicated, tax structure and entity structure and all these different ways that they connect and the loopholes and how you can take advantage of this. And to your point, it got way too complicated. I wasn't getting actually the benefits that I needed. And truthfully, a much simpler structure would have done the job just as fine too, right? Yep. So understanding kind of the levels to the game and where you're at and what you actually really need to protect against and what you don't can help you understand there's kind of, stepping stones based on where you're at in your career, what your goals are, what your timeline is, and, making sure that you've got the right suitability for the structure to what you're really trying to accomplish or not, have present itself to you. You hear a lot of people talk about piercing the corporate veil, right? And obviously entity structuring and things are a component of asset protection. And so when people say that they're concerned about piercing the corporate veil, is that a real risk? What should investors be thinking about or doing or not doing to avoid their entity structure being pierced and what's inside of it, being at risk? Like, how do you answer that question?
So it's actually a fairly rare remedy, right? That the court, when they feel that the, very sympathetic plaintiff has been wronged in some way, and there are elements that the court has to look at to pierce the veil. Piercing the veil means that there is a liability imposed on the entity, and they then seek to impose that liability on the owner, one or more owners. And it's a rare remedy. Each state has its own rules about it. I'm only licensed in Wyoming and Colorado, but I've looked at the laws of all the 50 states to understand what the veil piercing requirements are. And in all the cases, there is an element of fraud. You have to have used the LLC to perpetrate a fraud against this plaintiff. There's other elements that are there. That's the big one, though. And then the other one is going to be like, is there a lack of separation between the individual and the entity? And this happens sometimes inadvertently, right? You are people with rental properties, their tenants like, hey, can I pay you via Venmo? And they say, sure. And they got their personal Venmo account, and the tenant is now paying you personally. If something happens with that tenant, even though they signed a lease with the LLC and the liability should be on the LLC as the property owner, they're going to make the allegation. A good plaintiff's attorney is going to say, well, yeah, but we paid him. We paid him his personal bank out every month. How is he not just the alter ego of this business entity? So you need to maintain that separation. Don't engage in fraud, right? It's going to be, that's sort of one of the main elements there. And then the laws vary from state to state. I call it, some states are weak LLC states where they're more likely to allow a veil piercing. It's not as difficult sort of a hurdle to get over. There's things we do in those cases. If you're not in a weak LLC state, the other thing you have to be aware about, it's different than a veil piercing. It's personal responsibility imposed on the manager, the officer of that company. And the way that they're able to achieve that is they say that this individual was not actually acting in their capacity as the manager of the company. Example I give is, I need a new roof. I got a rental property. It's in an LLC. I need to get a new roof. My brother-in-law is a drunk, but you know what? He'll put it on the roof for cheap. My brother-in-law is not a drunk. He's a wonderful guy. I have to say that. I should stop saying it's my brother. But My buddy is a drunk, but I'm like, I'll let him do it. He's not licensed, bonded, insured, right? He doesn't really know what he's doing. He puts the roof up, roof collapses, kills my tenants. Okay. I'm personally liable because I didn't exercise business judgment. I wasn't acting in the best interest of the company. I was really just doing it because it's me, right? I like this guy. I'm going to give him some work. I'm held personally responsible, not as a veil piercing, but I'm sued personally for it. Alternative would be, I need a new roof. Go to the Better Business Bureau, find someone licensed, bonded, insured, get them to do the roof. Same result. Roof collapses. I'm not personally liable. The LLC will protect me. Now, how do you prove that later on? Well, you keep meeting minutes, right? And meeting is not challenging. It doesn't do nothing fancy, right? We actually, in the LLC attorney and on our websites, we make it really easy to get those meeting minutes. And you complete it. You say, if there's what decision was made, we need a new roof. I looked at the Better Business Bureau, found someone licensed, bonded, insured, and we hired John Smith to do the work for us. Boom, done. Roof collapses, you're protected. I recommend keeping those meeting minutes because at a later date, those are something where those business documents are easily admissible into court, right? When they try to hold me personally liable, I only made this decision because it was in the best interest of the company. So that is a small thing. It's different than veil piercing. It's the removing myself personal liability. If they named me, I get myself removed from that suit. The other thing I see is that if you've got multiple entities, I've got property 1, 2, and 3, each is in its own LLC, and I get a landscaper to come and mow the lawn for all 3. He gives me one invoice and I pay it from one. I've got a truck that I bought. I bought it in, it's my first property I own. I bought it in this one, but I use it for all 3. I'm commingling the expenses across all of those business entities. And they would say, well, they're really the sister entity. I call it sister piercing. All 3 of them are available to pay the claims of this creditor. So you need to think about it. If you set up the business entity, are you going to respect it and treat it as a business entity? If you're not, load up on insurance. Forget it. Save your couple $100 a year and just load up on insurance.
So is an LLC always the best structure for real estate, or maybe when, might an investor want to consider alternatives like an S Corp, a C Corp, or maybe a trust? How do you help clients choose between those and, whether they're single member or multi-member LLCs? What does that look like?
So individual investing in real estate, LLC, best approach. If you are doing syndications, if you're starting to get to that level, you want to bring in investors, that's a security, right? There's an old test called the Howey test, an investment in money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profit based solely on the efforts of others. Solely on the efforts of others, that's your limited partners. All the tests are met. Limited partnership, you'd got your general partnership, which may be an LLC, could be a corporation, most cases an LLC, but that type of structure is going to be more complicated. For the average person investing in real estate with themselves, some partners, we're going to do it alone or do it alone with some others. An LLC is the absolute best business entity to own that real estate. Now, depending on what it is you're doing, let's say you and I are going to be investing in, we're going to be doing like 5 properties together. That's sort of where our target is. We would likely want to have a holding company. Holding company is a partnership for me and Matt. That does a partnership return and issues us K1s. But then our subsidiary companies, each owning a piece of real estate, is a wholly owned subsidiary. It's an LLC. We treat it with respect. It's got its own bank account. It pays its own bills, collects its own rent, so on and so forth. But we're only going to get one. We're only going to have to do one tax return. S Corp. Sorry, I turn off my phone when somebody calls. It's probably very important. When would an S Corp tax election make sense? So again, not an entity type. LLCs and corporations, that Chinese restaurant menu, column A, LLC or corporation. When could it make sense for my LLC to elect to be treated as an S Corp? Well, if the income is generated not from the asset itself, but my labor, fix and flips, right? Property development, fix and flip. I buy it for $100,000. I put $50,000 in. I sell it for $250,000. It's not a capital gain, man. That's income. That's earned income. The income came from my labor. That could make sense for it to be an S Corp, because what an S Corp allows you to do is take that income, that earned income, and divide it into reasonable salary or reasonable compensation that's subject to self-employment tax. That's a FICA tax, 15.3% up to $175,000, 3.8% effectively above that. I could split that income into two parts. One is reasonable salary, call it $50,000, $75,000 a year, whatever it is, subject to FICA. The rest is not subject to FICA. So that's when an S corp election could make sense. It could make sense on a C corp, rare in real estate. It could make sense like if to have a C corp, like if I'm a property management, if I'm a real estate professional kind of thing, if I'm a property developer doing big deals where, I could have a significant investment from outsiders in that C corp election, or even a corporation could make sense. But that's where we're crossing that line to, do I have investors? Do I want these three levels, shareholders, board, officers? That can make sense. And then, when it comes to fix and flips, even fix and flips, I think I coined this term. Are a lot of listeners fix and flippers? Is that some?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens with fix and flips is you wind up with the liability builds up over time, right? So if there's a 1 in 10 chance when I do a fix and flip, there's going to be litigation. If I have a single LLC that I've used for 5 years and I've done 250 fix and flips in it, it's almost guaranteed that is going to get sued for some construction defect or fraud or something else, right? That fix and flip entity is going to be sued. And when the music stops, when the litigation comes in, if I've got 10 properties that are in the works in that entity, they're dead. They're frozen, right? They're going to get liens against them. They're going to do all sorts of things. So with fix and flips, I call it vintages. You have a holding company that's an S corp because we want to get that benefit. Subsidiary entity, which I do maybe a year's worth of flips in. Then by the time I'm finishing up the last one, those construction defects, that type of litigation typically takes some time. But by the time that entity gets sued, it's not doing fix and flips anymore. I've created my 2026 vintage and then my 2027 vintage and 28 vintage. So I'm limiting my downside. It's not ruinous. It could be ruinous if you've got a fix and flip business, and when you get sued, if you get sued, you've got 20 flips in there that are in the works and you can't sell them because now there's a cloud on the title or something else. That's ruinous, right? So we want to limit that type of exposure without creating a crazy administrative burden of having every property in its own LLC, or then we got to go get different financing or other things. So we have to think about where is the liability. And then what is the appropriate structure to mitigate that as much as possible? Small buckets of assets or small buckets of risk.
Now, you hear a lot of people talking about different states having different benefits or disadvantages. Are there advantages to forming LLCs in certain states, even if you invest outside of that state or you're investing from a different state? What are your thoughts on your favorite states to form LLCs, and what should people be thinking about or considering?
Yeah, I'm a bit biased. It's like my kids are the smartest, best looking, and whatever else. But I'm licensed in Wyoming, Colorado. But I would say I got licensed in Colorado first, and then got licensed in Wyoming because I think it is the best for LLCs. There's only about 600,000 people in Wyoming, and the legislature is really responsive to business interests, and so they have been improving the LLC laws over time. They innovated. 1977, they did authorized the first limited liability companies under state law, and they've been building on that over time. And they've improved the laws to take away. There was the one related to veil piercing where a judge had all this leeway based on sort of judge-made law, and the legislature did not like that. It was an outcome they did not like. So they changed the law and said you can only look at a very limited sort of slate of things. You may not look at these things. So they've done that. There's something called charging order protection in Wyoming. And so in many states, and I did a 50-state analysis looking at this, or sort of the weakest would allow, if I am sued, Jonathan, I get in a car accident, I got a big judgment against me, and I got all this real estate in LLCs. Judgment against me. My creditor could, in many states, foreclose on my membership interest in my LLC, take my LLC assets. Okay. That is just foreclosing on the membership interest. That's the weakest. Wyoming, opposite end of the spectrum. What Wyoming says is that if there's a judgment, even against a single member LLC, against the member of that single member LLC, it cannot be used to disrupt the LLC, foreclose on the membership interest, go after or break into the LLC's assets. You get a charging order, which means you sit on the outside of the LLC, and if a distribution is made, they would be entitled to it, that judgment creditor. So that's why we use Wyoming LLCs as a holding company for weak LLC states to protect those weak LLC state assets from judgments that may come against me as an individual. And so in those cases, if you've ever been sued, one of the things they add, if you don't pay, you have to undergo a debtor's exam. Debtor's exam, what assets do you have? You would be able to say, if you set it up correctly, I own a Wyoming LLC. That's it. I don't own North Carolina, Florida, California LLCs or rental properties. I own a Wyoming LLC. And I have to say, it is like kryptonite. When a plaintiff's attorney sees that you've got a Wyoming LLC, they are like, yeah, all right, let's just settle, right? It's like they want to settle. So beyond that, trusts, right? We got trust. Most people need an estate planning type of trust, revocable living trust. What that does is it avoids your assets having to go through probate. Probate is a court proceeding at the state level. Anywhere you have an asset in that state, you would have to open up either the primary probate process or an ancillary proceeding. So if Matt has an LLC in North Carolina and in California and in Virginia, if Matt dies, his family is going to have to go open up an ancillary estate proceeding in all of those states to settle it, to get that asset brought to his heirs, beneficiaries. By having a revocable living trust, you name the revocable living trust as the member of your LLCs. In a perfect world, Wyoming LLC, revocable living trust above that, owns all of those below it. And we make a really smooth, easy transfer of those assets if something, God forbid, were to happen to Matt. His successor trustee takes over, manage it as if nothing happened. Problem with trusts, right? Attorneys charge too much for them. I can tell you that. There's some things where you need a complex estate plan. And those things are going to be, do you have a special needs child? Special needs child, want to make sure your assets don't go to the child because it can hurt their ability to get government resources. Do you have a blended family? Right? You've got kids from prior relationships, kids from this relationship. What happens if mom dies? And then where does it go? And who, that kind of thing. You need some advanced planning. And the other one is, are you high net worth to the point where you could be subject to estate tax? Under current law, it's about $13 million per individual. If the big beautiful bill passes, it goes to 15 index for inflation. If it doesn't pass, then we revert back to about 7. Right. So if you're not above those amounts, you don't have special needs. Maybe a prenup would be sort of a fourth thing. Is there a prenup potentially involved here? You don't have any of those things, then a simple estate plan will work for you with revocable living trust, poor will, so on and so forth. I actually teamed up with it's like a software company. And to say, qualify people, help them understand it, and then walk them through. So it's like guided self-help, same sort of thing we do with LLCs. But they have me telling them this is good for you because they don't trust it, right? They don't trust that this simple plan is good enough. And then an attorney, if they go to an attorney, they're like, oh, you need the $2,500 or $5,000 plan. I'm talking like, but with these plans that I'm doing, it's like $500, $750. And the idea there as well is, if you have a significant life change, you should update your plan. Right.
Yeah.
And that makes it where you're not like married to this old plan you have. That's no longer appropriate. Something your kid becomes special needs or you pass the wealth barrier or whatever else it is. Those sorts of things happen. So a state revocable living trust owns a holding company, which owns the LLCs. You're good to go.
And I was going to kind of ask, do you have like a simple checklist or framework that you use to help investors kind of audit their current entity and legal setup to identify gaps or holes in it, areas that need to get, kind of maybe fortified or shifted based on life experiences like you just mentioned?
Yeah. So one of the great things again, we don't want people to have to talk to attorneys, and not a law firm, but I've taken my knowledge and knowledge of my partners, attorneys focused on this kind of thing. And we've got a business success team. They've got a great knowledge base. Call in, they've heard it all before pretty much. You call in or you email, hey, I've got a question about this. So like, here's a video John did on that, right? Here's a piece he wrote on that. Go to this page of the website. Here's the, attorney will generally say this. That the overwhelming majority of people, that's all they need. If you've got more complex needs, you can schedule with myself or one of our other attorneys, and I call a single serving attorneys. I get 30 minutes, pay the fee for that 30 minutes. We talk it through, and at the end of it, 95% of the time, it is a here is the structure that's best for you, right sized. It's not a 50-foot wall with guard dogs. It's going to be the ring camera and maybe go get a carry permit or something like that, right? So we come up with the structure and then hand them off to the business success team who's like, okay, here's the step-by-step instructions that the attorney gave you. We'll show you how to do it inside the client portal. So that becomes the guided self-help. I can guide, or they can get these, a lot of the materials we have to guide them, and then they could do it themselves.
Very cool. Now, before we kind of, wrap up on the tail end of the episode, I'm just curious if you can share, maybe an example of like where you saw bad structuring or ignoring kind of the legal basics that, ended up in an investor getting burned really bad, or maybe on the flip side, any favorite success stories where smart structuring with entities really saved the day.
So on the bad side, a guy, he saw online, is like every property should have its own LLC. I do not agree with that. Okay. The structure you should, well, I'll tell you the story before I digress. He bought 10 properties on a lake. They were cabins on a lake. And he bought the 10 properties. Each one had its own deed, right? He set up 10 LLCs to own the 10 properties. Okay, great. In a what you see on the internet, that's what you would think. Each property was only $50,000. It was seller finance. He only put $5,000 down. So he had a grand total of $50,000 worth of equity, and he was going to hire one landscaper to go in and maintain it. He was going to have a handy person who would go and fix them and all that stuff. And it was completely untenable. In addition, he wasn't generating that much income from them. So he's got all these LLCs with all these expenses, and he's like, this just doesn't work. I would never told you to do that. That should have been one LLC. Right? They're really operating together, and you've only got 50,000 of equity involved there. Another one is that people have an operating business and they decide that we're going to buy the building. We're going to operate the building. Our landscaping business, we're going to operate it out of this building.
This is a good one.
And their business was an S Corp because it made great sense to have the business in an S Corp. So then they've got all this cash sitting inside of the S Corp, which, by the way, is post-tax. Don't keep more money than you need to inside of your business entity. They would then purchase the property with the S Corp. And purchasing property in S Corp, at some point in the future, you may need to move that property out of the S Corp for like a refinancing. The bank's not going to want it. Well, it's owned by this LLC with all this operational risk. We just want to lend against the building, right? We don't want to lend against the S Corp. Moving appreciated property, which with the depreciation you've took as well, out of the S Corp is a taxable event. You wind up with phantom income as if it's a capital gain event on that transfer out. Don't own the real estate in an S Corp. Those are two bad things. The analysis of the properties, do I have one LLC per property or not? I view it as a risk and equity matrix, right?
Yep.
High risk property. It's Section 8 fourplex. Definitely goes in its own LLC. I got 3 condos in a Class A building, right? The only risk is within the 4 walls. Everything else is HOA, common area risk. Even if I've got $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 in equity in each of those properties, I'm going to put them in one LLC. It's just going to be easier for me to manage. There's no reason to separate them out because the risk of something happening is so low. Great story. The risk versus equity analysis. Had a nice couple. They were inheriting real estate from her father, and he had 3 LLCs for about 100 doors, and that's untenable, right? That's too much. But what they were concerned about is we can't form 100 LLCs. So what I helped them do was we put it onto a grid, right? What are the properties? You're going to create a risk number, 1 through 5. What is this property? Is it risky or not? Then you're going to take the equity and you're going to set a line in your head. Okay, I want no more than $250,000 of equity in any single LLC. Because remember, whatever's in the LLC, if it gets sued, it's up for grabs. And they did that and they wound up with like 22 or something LLCs. They needed much more manageable, right? And then they put a property management company in place. And so that's a great success story. What seemed to be you wanted to sort of stick with, we're just going to keep 3 LLCs. There was some happy medium in there between 100 and 3 that protected them and prevented something catastrophic. With the 3 LLCs, something happened, he's screwed. You go catastrophic. You lose 1/3 of your net worth. So those are bad, and then the good. It just think about your personal situation, right? And this is what attorneys do. Attorneys apply the law and your personal facts and then come up with a recommendation for it. Most people can handle that on their own. What they don't understand, though, is like, what is the appropriate law, or like tell them what the law is. And so what we do at the end of the entity formation business is it's really just a education process, not legal advice coming out of from our team. But if you need to talk to an attorney, you can do it. Oh, you're mute. I can't hear you. Is that me or you?
That's me. So I know a lot of people might have some interest in chatting with you, your team, learning more about how, entities tie into their specific goals and situation. What's the best place for them to do that?
So just LLCattorney.com. Go to LLCattorney.com, and at the top is a phone number, and someone picks up the phone. I think between like 7 a.m. and Eastern, and like maybe 7 p.m. Eastern. So 10, 12 hours a day. Team is there. Answer your questions. You can email them, however you like to interact. And then if it's a question where they know they're not going to give legal advice, they are going to provide you with the educational materials, and they say, look, your situation's complicated. And it's a complicated situation. You've already got a lot of existing entities and are looking to do sort of a restructuring, tax efficiency, figure out where you can save some money. Then at that point, they'll say, go book with one of our attorneys. They'll send you the link to our attorney consultation page, and you pay. And usually next day, even sometimes same day, speak to an attorney who can confirm what you think. If you're a bit confused, if you watch too many TikToks or those sorts of things, help you figure it out. So that's the place. And there's no, you talk to them, form with LLC attorney or not. I think there's so many other great things that we do. 50 state entity formations, keeping you compliant, very reasonable cost, not law firm prices. These are like comparable, if not less expensive than what you're going to see everywhere else out there.
Well, we'll be sure to link up all of that in the show notes for Jonathan's episode. Brother, thank you so much for coming on today.
Awesome. Matt, thank you. It was awesome. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you guys know this show would not be what it is without you, the amazing listener, the support, sharing this out with other people who can gain value from it, taking 60 seconds to leave a review. If you haven't done so already, those things mean the world to us and ultimately help us spread this message out to as many people as we possibly can to help them on their wealth building journey. If you have any particular links or resources that you're trying to track down that were mentioned in this interview, be sure to check out this episode at millionaireMindcast.com, where you can find access to all that information. And of course, if you haven't checked out the Wise Investor Vault yet, be sure to head over to wiseinvestorvault.com to check out all the tools, all the resources, the checklists, the spreadsheets, the trackers, all kinds of amazing things that can help you on your wealth building journey at the wiseinvestorvault.com. If you haven't connected with me on social media yet, I'm consistently putting out more content, stories, value to help you on your wealth building journey. And one of the best and most exciting things for me on a weekly basis is getting to connect with you guys. Getting your DMs, hearing what things impacted you, what you need help with is a big way that we continue to drive the content for this show. So if we're not connected and following each other on Instagram, on social media, at official Matty A, give me a like and a follow. Would love to connect with you there. And of course, don't forget to get on my deals list. If you're an accredited investor, you want to look at more deal flow, you want to see what deals I have access to, what deals I'm raising capital for. This is an exclusive list that I only put out to my accredited investor list, my Millionaire Mindcast family. So text the word deals to 844-447-1555. And with that being said, thank you again so much for supporting the show. Until next week's episode, keep investing in yourself and your wealth on your march to $1 million and beyond. Cheers.